Hello, this is Chris Parker with the Business Simplicity Podcast. And I had a conversation with Werner Spronk, and he's a recruiter headhunter with Terra Search here in the Netherlands. And he's focusing on chief product officers and chief technology officers, or the combination of CPTOs. And we had a very interesting conversation about his approach, which doesn't only look at the candidates in the search, but actually the entire leadership team dynamics and the personalities there, the skills and preferences there, sometimes even the work type and how those individuals are energized. And the point of this is to not only select the right person, but really to contribute to having that person be a net add to the team on a long term. And it's really, really nice approach. So, Werner, why would it be really valuable for people to listen to this?
I believe that if you do understand the true team dynamics, what makes a team strong, what makes a team not strong, and if you have proper insight into those, you can hire someone who makes the entire team stronger. And especially on C level, I think 70, 80, maybe 85% of the success of a person is how they fit into that leadership team. So that should be central when you want to hire someone, when you want to add someone to the team.
Welcome to the Business Simplicity Podcast, where Chris Parker explores how leaders cut through complexity to accelerate strategy, execution, and growth with calm, clarity, and confidence.
Welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Werner Spronk. And he is a recruiter and headhunter with his own firm called Terra Search. And you can find that at tech as in TECH, Terra, TERRA, search.nl. And his specialty is right up my alley. I mean, it's like chief technology officers, chief product officers, CPTOs, these hybrid beasts that sometimes I fit into that domain as well. And I love it on his LinkedIn. He says, and also sometimes he occasionally does like CEOs and commercial officers, but he's primarily in the tech and product space in the mid-market, in the scale-up space. So obviously we've been connected for a while. Not quite sure, at least a year. I knew you in your previous agency, and now you're independent. And during that process of getting to know you, this is, you have a certain method that I thought was really cool. And I'm so just excited to unpack it with you. And that method is a way of understanding how a new tech or product leader can best land in a leadership team for the most value and, just successfully land. And that's what we're going to unpack later on today. But before we go into that, Werner, I'm just curious, like Terra and your own position, because you're doing things your own way and have your own, I guess, imprint on this recruiting hunting space. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you got to this point of running Terra, your own agency, with this focus and in this really unique way, at least what I think is unique. And then we'll get into the deep end of your actual method.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. And like to be here a lot. Always liked having chats with you and always seeing that there's more than meets the eye, that there's always a new layer which you can open up and discuss. So always happy to talk to you.
Mm.
And if I go back really far, then I'm always about understanding something for first before judging and not going back into my entire career. But I think I stumbled into the domain of a recruiter. There's no education for it. And I think most people somehow end up in it without being a conscious decision, but they just like the job and then somehow it works out for them. And I stumbled into it and I noticed that I really like being able to do something for people, do something for companies. It's a very people-driven job, but also quite commercial. That landed really well. And I know that when I started in this job 12 years ago, the product position in many companies was still not that mature. So it was pretty complex. And what does it hold? What does it encompass? What is its merit? And with every position I worked on in that product sphere, it was pretty complex understanding what type of person you need, how does it fit within the company, what does success look like. So you need like 3 extra layers already to understand it, how to make someone successful from that part. So that's why I like the product domain. And then I'm a completely non-technical person myself, but I grew up in a technical family, and I think that's why I connect with tech people pretty good. So then it evolved to product and tech, and then to product and tech leadership. And what I've seen in recruitment, but also in headhunting, is that I think it's really strange that people focus up to doing a placement and then they take their hands off because that's the job of the company, the job of the candidate. Whereas I think, well, that's where the journey actually starts. So you should be able to influence that. And if you then start looking at what makes someone successful in a leadership team, I think that stuff like experience and hard skills, those are hygiene factors. That's always it's a must-have, but hygiene as well. But what really differentiates if someone is successful is whether they are a fit with the assignment of what the company needs to do and how they fit within that leadership team. And the interesting part is, or no, where I find it's getting interesting is that to do so, you have to assess the leadership team to understand whether they are fit for future and fit for purpose. And the leadership team has to be open to willing to do that. So before you jump into working on an assignment, you have to have a complete different conversation, quite often with founders in my case, about why are you doing what you're doing? And are you doing things that gives you energy, or does it drain energy? But is it still based on your ego, or is it because you don't see another way? And what do you really want for yourself? And in the end, if you do this the right way, then it's, or at least how I came to my proposition nowadays, is that I not only want to find the person that does the job, but I want to find the person that makes the entire team stronger. And the job is way more interesting because you end up somewhere between being a coach, a headhunter, a consultant, designing teams, how to make them successful. It can be pretty fluffy, but in the end, you can do it all at once in one project, because it's all small projects, I would say. And then you can have influence on if someone starts, on how to help them being successful, how to connect with the team, how to connect with their leader better. And then you start truly making impact.
And I did a little more research. Of course, I have my own experience on this, but I couldn't find any metrics of failure or success of CPTOs or chief product officers in certain domains. But out of what I was able to find is a number of risks or known issues. And like some of them are like bringing the wrong playbook, so like if you come in with a heavy enterprise bureaucratic approach for a smaller pre-scale up, it's just not going to fit, that type of stuff. And also things like if it's if you're doing mid-market scale up, it could still, the founder might still be there, and the founders of course have these, it's more personality driven than, let's say, role driven. And in those situations, it can be even more complex, on how, does that founder, like if it's a new role, because not all organizations have a head of product, and then once they're scaling, that might have been part of what the founder was doing, and then a new head of product comes in, and does the founder give it away? Are they
Yeah.
synced up? How do they do the prioritization? Not the roadmap prioritization, but just the first 100 days prioritization. I think there's
Yeah.
so many opportunities for this to go so wrong. And the thing that really triggered me about your approach in our previous conversations was you looked at the management team. So it wasn't like only the relationship between the head of product and tech or the CEO, but it's the team dynamic. So I'm curious, how did you get like what happened in your life that triggered you to say, hey, I need a more holistic approach on this? Is it like how did we get here?
Interesting one. I'm asking myself that one as well. And I think I'm quite a curious person. So I always like to find new approaches on how to make things, how to do new things when you look at one thing, how can you find different ways of making that one thing better,
Mm-hmm.
making that one process better. And for the CTPO position, it somehow it for 4 or 5 years ago, I got the question quite often: do we need a CTO or a CTO and a CPO or a CTPO? What do we need? So then I started uh, thinking of, can I make a method like a tree in which I put in variables on the one side and then have a workflow and then understand whether I need a CTO or a CTO and a CPO or a CPTO or whatever. And I did about 30 to 35 interviews with CTOs, CPOs, and CEOs about, can we make a decision tree for this? And then there were so many variables possible that, or at least with my capabilities, I couldn't make up this decision tree. The others, they didn't find it as well. So then I went back to those group of people and I asked them a different question. I asked them, what do I need to ask to understand whether and to have the right context to understand what choice to make? So that ended up in a thing which I use now, which is, I call it a quick scan. It's between 25 to 30 questions, which I always use to understand the company, the team, and situation, the assignment, and then work backwards to getting a profile. And during those discussions, I always noticed that people would almost never talk about the team aspect, which is really strange. And they would say, yeah, we focus on team. And if I would ask, how do you focus on team? It's quite often, yeah, by talking to people. And then if I ask, what do you assess? Then it went quiet.
Mm.
So it was more based on gut feel and people saying, I trust my gut feel to do this right, instead of doing it with the right tools or with a procedure or a more analytical method to get to that. And for me, that was like really strange, because in the end, I've never seen a C-level hire not being successful because he didn't have the experience, because he was lacking the hard skills. And what you mentioned before, if you have founders who have done something for 5 or 7 or 10 years and who are extremely successful with that, and they start hiring a CPO, while mostly they themselves are sort of a super product owner, which know everything about the product. And if something doesn't go right, they go down into the very tiniest detail of that, wanting to fix it. If you then hire a CPO, you have to give the person freedom, autonomy, and you're not allowed to do that anymore. And do you have the self-insight to change your own behavior that way? That's where it all starts. With the self-insight is what is my spot? What do I do? And am I capable of changing this? And then with the self-insight comes, how do I collaborate with the team? Almost what you can call team insights. And I felt this domain, and what I always like to understand is that what are the things which people don't say, which are really important? Because quite often that's where the blind spots are. And if you find the blind spots and you can help people identify them, that's where quite often a lot of gain is for a team.
I
Sorry, a lot
my
of context, but
no,
for me,
no,
it's
this is
simple.
beautiful. My belief is, but maybe you can paint the picture a little differently, that this is, um, if I'm understanding this correctly, that you're actually, let's talk about the dynamic between the CEO, probably CTO, and let's imagine there's a new chief product coming in. Let's just
Yeah,
as a case, um, that you seem to also be looking at the shift or the change of this new role for the CEO and CTO, as well as what the new head of product would need to adjust or emphasize stepping in. So you're looking at really a system here,
yeah,
as opposed to, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm a bit too linear on it, but if it's a maybe a larger organization and this is a role that they've had a number of times and it's okay, they just need to fill a seat, they're filling a seat on the bus and they're not looking at the bus, the configuration of the
yeah.
bus. Do you feel this is remarkably different than a typical recruiting pathway or process, or do you think you just have a few minor nuances that some sparkles that you've put on it? Because it feels very different from what I've experienced before. That's why I'm curious.
Yeah, yeah, I believe it is, but that's then me also a little bit boasting about my method, of course,
Hmm.
because normally recruitment or headhunting focuses on a person. And if assessments are being done, it's based on that person. It's almost never about the team.
Yeah.
I've only seen one other person doing this in the Netherlands at least. I think I know quite some people here. And in the end, I think it's a necessity to focus on that team aspect. And for example, I uh, quite often work with founders which were able to spot their blind spots but were not able to act upon it. And I've seen it go wrong there because they were, and quite often when someone starts and he or she is doing a good job, scores 8 out of 10, for example, in the first 6 to 9 months, everything goes perfect. And then when pressure hits or things start going not as smooth as suspected, then there are these tiny things which people already felt underwater and which they felt in collaborating with someone, which then can become a big thing and which then become the reason for not going further together.
Hmm.
And that's almost always in the team part or in the internal collaboration part. And like you mentioned, I think you have these family constellations, which from psychology is being used a lot. I think you have the same thing, but then for companies, and especially with founders, it has been evolving constantly around them with so many things that are for them completely logical, but so logical that it is implicit and not explicit.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you expect someone to come in from the outside, join that team constellation, and understand all the implicities without and they are always hired for a big wage, which people feel. So they are expected to deliver really rapidly from a content perspective, from a team perspective, from a change perspective, everything. And in the end, it's always the team part. If it goes wrong, it's always the team within the team and the team constellation.
Hmm. Well, what's being triggered to me, and I've written the book, Lead from Love with Rumi, is earlier views of that. I was also like, you know, and it never really expanded, but there seemed to be like lazy leadership and then what I called then love leadership. And it sounds like what you're expressing to me is there could be a way that maybe you're a little bit more lazy and say, let's just assess the candidate, and the candidate has to, these hard skills we have to tick, and then
Yeah,
let's bring it in. But in this case, it requires a deeper investment of time and energy and reflection,
yeah,
self-awareness of the different people. So I'm curious if you are able to walk us through the process from the eyes of the CEO. I would love that. Like, okay, let's imagine there's a founder CEO, the same case, and they have a head of tech as well. Maybe both count
yeah,
with founders,
yeah,
and they're going to bring a head of product in. But from the view, the perspective of the CEO, and they call you and they say, hey, Werner, we need a chief product officer. Um,
yeah,
how does that go? Like how do you check in with them on whether they're going to do the lazy way or the love way? My words, not your words.
yeah.
Or, you
Well,
know,
very interesting question, and I'm having a discussion on this with some people around me a lot because always when uh, I'm lucky to have people be advocates for me. So in the end, every job I've done in the last 1.5 years was because someone recommended me to someone else, and then it happened. Which is always a nice way to get in because then you already have built a level of trust
mhm.
because it's always about people that trust. So that's a head start, I would say. And 9 out of 10 times it happens that they've said to me, well, we have this JD with a few job specs, but from an experience perspective, what do we need? And then they ask me after like 10 or 15 minutes, do you know what we need? And I always say no. And then they start getting a bit, what's happening? And then I start asking questions.
Mhm.
And then I start asking questions about themselves. And then some people really like that. And you really soon feel whether the person is able to come along with that or is completely not open to it. But in the end, I have to accept that they come with me with a simple question. We need a new CTO or CPO. And then during the conversation, I have to flip it completely around. Do you understand your position within the team? And what are your strengths? Where do you want to grow? And from that perspective, start working towards that team part. And then telling them, well, I can help you with the team part, and then find someone that makes the team stronger.
Mm.
But the CEO needs to be flexible and adaptive into not having his first question answered. Because I'm not going to answer within 15 minutes what he needs. I need a lot more time. I need to understand the CEO, I need to understand the team, I need to understand the assignment. And I have to talk to 5 people for that. Then I do an assessment with all those 5, quite often 3, 4, 5 people. Then I give them a quick scan debrief with advice on the team. And then I come up with a profile. So it takes
Now,
much more time.
now the thing that I find so remarkable about this is in processes I've been in, and I've given this feedback in the past as well. Like okay, I as a candidate need to do this assessment, right? And you're going to assess me, and like can I see the same assessment for the team I'm joining?
Yeah.
To give me that insight and understanding, and you're actually doing it. So, how do you assess those 5 people? I know you have a couple like psychometric models and different tools
Yeah.
and stuff, but what is the journey of discovery of, let's say, the team? And do you do
Yeah.
the same thing with the candidate then afterwards? And so you can compare and contrast, or it's like how does that sort of arc of that story go?
Yeah. Quite often there is a make or break moment during the first chat I have, which is quite often the pitch. Funny thing is, I don't pitch at all. I always start just ask a lot of questions, and then in the end, I say, "Well, I think I can help you, but it's up to you to decide." And one of the things which needs to happen during that first interview is that I give the other people feedback on what they are doing, what probably works for them and what doesn't work for them. And if that resonates, I'm in. If it doesn't resonate, I'm completely out. And luckily, up to this far, it has always resonated. So, but it has to click from a perspective. This is going to be completely different than just finding a person.
Well, I in previous conversations, you've told me that there's been moments that you've done search for different reasons and maybe different times that you didn't do this method, and
Yeah.
it didn't work out in the end. Meaning the placement burned, failed, whatever, left sooner than anticipated. So you do have some experience to compare and contrast, right? So I mean, did you not do this method at those times because the hiring executive was closed to the feedback, or was there other dynamics going on?
Yeah, there were other dynamics going on. Some of them I won't go into details. Some of them were social impact companies where the fee, I accepted a way lower fee, but then decided not to do the assessment because it cost me money as well. In the end, what I noticed is that I think can be pretty, it's not stubborn, but if I feel something and if I see something which I truly believe in, then I'm not going to be just a supplier working for you. I'm wanting to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to help them with that because I genuinely believe they can come out stronger. But if my belief is a mismatch with their belief, it's really hard for me to find the proper candidate. Because we have two different frames and the frames don't align completely. And then it's a lot of hard work. Quite often you're using different words, then you're looking with different views on the same thing. So having that frame completely the same before I start, that I learned that is a must for me to do a search.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it can be frustrated for almost everybody.
Well, I guess if you, and I know your focus is let's say mid market, so under 1,000 people or so. And in larger enterprises, I can imagine this is maybe seen as more transactional. So we need a new head of sales. So let's go get one of the some headhunter and run this process, and it's oftentimes cost driven, and HR's pushing the process. And okay, so you've got sometimes a queen of the pigs type situation, like, okay, none of them really work, but we need head of sales, so get on with it. And that might work in an enterprise place where there's much more people, and then if things don't work, it just kind of averages out, just rule of numbers up there. But in this case, I can imagine that founder or mid-market CEO are mission critically dependent on these new leaders, meaning that this could literally make or break them, their investment, their livelihood. And I would hope that they would really embrace the team view. But I could also imagine they would be a little bit vulnerable, like to do a big, like on your website, the different methodologies. There's the big 5 personality test. There's an archetype of leaders approach. Job fulfillment matrix. In your experience, are they open to going through this process and being transparent with the outcome and the results? Like, do you do this like with the whole team, or is this very confidential? Like I guess that for me, that could be a part of the sensitive part. Or am I getting this wrong?
It can be a very sensitive part. Absolutely. If you do it respectful with the aim of understanding how someone can improve the team, then quite often I'm allowed to ask any question I want. And in the end, the real sensitive stuff doesn't quite often doesn't go out there because you formulate it in a positive frame. So if you do it properly, people are very much open to talk about a lot of things. Then again, there's always people who have a agenda which they like to have seen, and sometimes a CCO has a different agenda than a CEO or a CTO, and sometimes someone is
Of course.
absolutely open to hiring a CPO, but then again also thinks what's going to be my new position within the company if a CPO comes in with a lot of experience from maybe a much bigger company. So sometimes people are scared as well. And the funny thing is that with these different tools I use, I'm looking on values, on personal drivers, but also on tasks, on hard skills, on experience, but also on energy. And if you use different tools to look at the same thing, people start, quite often people like to go through that and they like to learn about themselves and they open up pretty easily. Yeah.
Well,
But
a concern I have, and let's maybe dig into that a little bit, is like on the previous episode with Araz Najarian, we talked about psychometrics and principles of appropriate use of psychometrics according to Araz and the EOP network. And one of the fundamental rules of that community is do not use psychometrics to make decisions about people. Like if you talk about Myers-Briggs, and it's not a method that you use in here, but I'm an INTP that has strong J preferences because I've learned that in work. And what I would hope is if people observe me as an INTPJ and I was coming into an organization, that they wouldn't use that against me. They're like, oh, we already have enough NTs, so we need some more SJs, and or whatever. So how do you use this, the outcomes of these, not to make finite decisions, or do you?
Yeah, so it's true. It's a tool should never be used as a bar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a tool to understand a person. And the person is always much more than what comes out of the tool.
Yeah.
So something can be you, or it can be what you've learned, or it can be what you think you need to do for that position. So there can be a lot of reasons why you do what you do, and is it internally or externally? So it's always a tool to understand what is happening in that in situations. So what I use the tools for is that from three different perspectives, I try to understand better what the person is good at, what gives them, what doesn't give them energy, how they collaborate with people, how they act when they are put under pressure. And the next step is combining that output with the other team members and trying to see whether there is a lot of overlap or whether there are big gaps. And if you find the gaps and you understand what the company needs to do, then you can say, well, maybe we want to hire someone who's strong at that particular perspective. And then it becomes interesting, because do you want someone who's complementary to you? Mm-hmm. Or do you want someone who can cross the bridge between where you are right now and where you want to go? For example, I worked with this startup. They wanted to work with really big corporates because that would be their clients. So do they hire someone who is extremely well in procedures and structure and details? Or do you hire someone who is in between the big corporate and them? And having those understandings where you are as a person, where you are as a team, where the newly to be hired person is at, and then having a chat I see differences, but do you know how to cross the differences? And have you seen it before? Have you been in such a place? Does it annoy you or not? Do you get energy out of it or not? And then you're able to have, I think, the right discussion where that person is the right contribution to your team.
Yeah. I think indeed, if you, and I just a crude generalization, but sometimes people hire people that are like them.
Yeah.
Physically, otherwise as well. And if you want to really get the benefits of let's call it diversity in every definition, having this awareness of, okay, this is how I think, and this is how I operate, and this is how, what gives me energy, and to know that with everyone else on the team. In any case, I think that's healthy. I can imagine that they're finding, they're understanding themselves and others better, and maybe some of the unspoken conflicts in the team are surfaced anyways. And then but can you walk through the different methods you use, and why do you use them? Like how is it valuable? Like I know Big Five personality, but more from marketing. Like how do you use this in the context of search and selection or team dynamics?
Yeah, so the Big Five, in the end, most psychometric tools have a pretty bad scientific backing. The Big Five has a pretty decent one. Yesterday, I spoke to this Hilke Strangers. Maybe you know him. He's a professor nowadays as well, former CTO. And he said, well, really good about the Big Five because it's one of the best methods out there. So I was almost cheering. And then I felt like, you can also use non-scientifically backed tools if you just use them in the right manner. So in the end, for me, it was nice to have a tool which assesses people trait-based. So I don't like it when you're either green or red or yellow or blue, or when you become a table or a plant or whatever outcome there is. And the Big Five says that people, this is a bit trainer's language, of course, but everybody's unique, but we look like each other as well. And the way we are similar, they have 5 domains, and you can score a 1 per domain or a 10, and every position has its own strengths and own weaknesses. And the nice thing is that every position is good, every position has its own strengths, and you can also see how people relate to each other. So for example, if someone has a lot of willpower, quite often the best entrepreneurs have a lot of willpower. But if you have 3 people in a team with a lot of willpower, probably you don't need a 4th, because you're just going to get a big fight. Probably you need someone who is able to connect everybody, or how to communicate it to the rest of the team. So looking at it from these different traits from a balanced perspective, and for example, there's one which is called affection in the model. Affection is whether are you focused on yourself or on others. And nowadays everybody says, well, it's really bad to focus only on yourself. But if you want to have a very good commercial guy in your team, he has to be so result driven that he's only focused on getting the best result for the company and for himself, and not feeling too sorry for the other company. So he has to score low on affection. So there are, for every different job and every different assignment, you can ask yourself, well, do we have the right setup in the team? And if not, how do we like to see that with the person?
Yeah.
And I like the Big Five because it's trait based, and you can compare it really well amongst each others. And it's really interesting, but almost fascinating to see how a questionnaire with 100 questions, which you fill in 10 minutes, gives people back a lot of insights on themselves. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't know it. And if you start combining insights from that questionnaire, that's where the magic happens. That's where people start to move. That's where they start to really discuss their own frame, whether it's the right thing to do or not. And then you truly get to know someone. So that's for me the main driver in getting to know a person and understanding the team. And then the second one, which I use, is an archetype model from Manfred Vries, which is much more focused on what is your, and it has 8 archetypes. Like, are you a strategist, or are you a builder, or an innovator, or a coach, or a communicator? What gives you energy? What drains energy? And where do you feel good at? Are you grown into this role? And do you do it because you think you have to do it, or is it because it's truly you? It's a different way of it. It's much more task driven about what you do than it's based on your values. And sometimes people are completely aligned with their tasks which they do, and their values. But sometimes people aren't, and there is a big misalignment. And sometimes with only showing people that there's a misalignment in what they do and what their values are, they say, now I understand why I've been fighting that hard over the last 2 years. And it feels like I'm extremely successful, but still my energy is getting lower and lower and lower. And the funny thing is, if you start combining these tools, and then the last one as well, and then there are some cross checks within that, which are completely non-scientifically based. But if you give that back to people, you open up their eyes, and then you get a discussion about, should we change things? Should we keep on doing this? Yeah.
And the last one, the job fulfillment matrix, which is a 2x2 matrix, energizing and draining on one side, and bad at it and good at it on the bottom side. This is the one I'm least familiar with. How do you use this? What goes in that matrix?
Yeah, so what goes in it is, and this one I use the least, unless there is a lot of uh, energy drains within the work people are doing. Not so much amongst each other, but much more, what am I doing in my work? And I'm putting in a lot of effort, but I don't see the outcome, and it drains me. If I hear that, then I start using this tool.
Hmm.
And it's pretty simple. I ask people, what are the 7 or 8 main tasks you're doing in your job? Or first, what are your responsibilities? What are then your main tasks you're doing? And plot those tasks on, do they give you, or do they drain energy? And are you good at it, or are you bad at it? And then you have to just put post-its on the map. And then in the end, you want to be where it gives you energy and where you're good at.
Hmm.
And in the end, mostly, I think most teams are between 60 and 80% of the post-its are at the good at it and giving energy. But the friction is what doesn't give you energy, or where you're bad at. And how can you then use that insights to come up with a new constellation for the team that not only gives the new person the right insights on what he or she should do, but also makes the team and individual people better capable of doing what they do and giving more energy back.
It would be interesting if it's a CPTO coming in and somebody else on the team is super energized and they're really, really good at, I don't know, product visioning and strategy and road mapping or something, so something that's just fundamental in the zone of this new role.
Yeah.
Have that conversation. How do you benefit from the passion and expertise of the other person while still, defining the space that, the new person can still have a chance to succeed. So a couple of things on my mind is this is much more into like leadership and team development than recruiting. So I can also imagine why a typical recruiter might not go into this, because it's you need knowledge, experience, you need methods, You also
Yeah.
need the time, which I assume then costs more.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, I think is this the unique um, proposition for this place in the market? I can see how it fits, and I guess
Yeah.
what now that I'm understanding it better, I'm also realizing, okay, maybe not every recruiter needs this, but in certain cases, I can see that why it's how it's really really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think looking forward with AI, and of course, everybody's talking about AI, and AI will change everything. But finding people and selecting on hard skills or experience, that will be AI in 2 or 3 years completely, I suppose. So the job of recruitment and headhunting will shift completely. What is the added value of people in the future? And I think that's a combination of knowledge about how to make people and teams successful. That's also one of the things I jumped into this because I think the job will change, and how are we still relevant in the future?
Mm.
But also, the job is way more nice if you, or at least I like it a lot better, because it's much more about the genuine connection with someone than just writing down what they want and working from there.
Yeah, it's much more intimate, and it's much more transversal across the people. I'm jumping onto the AI thing. Obviously, we don't. None of us know where this will actually go, but certainly the applicant tracking systems and the recruiting systems, those AI can mine for hard skills and keywords and that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
more and more, you're getting like AI interviews that they're able to vet experience, again coming down to keywords and semantics, etc. But I also think on the other side, um, candidates are using AI more and more to
absolutely.
freak the system. So I think it's kind of the zero sum game. And one of my thoughts is um, just in general, the more that people are able to fake and deep fake things with AI, the human connection, the authentic relationship will become more and more important.
Yeah.
Meaning, not everything can be automated in the system.
No.
Maybe if it's a call center person, like if it's a really routine thing but that's probably going to be replaced by AI anyways. So having this interpersonal human relationship dimension is, I believe, is where the trust and the magic is going to happen
Yeah.
moving forward, because that's what can't get automated, and that's what we're
Yeah.
working on.
Yeah. And I think AI in the future can detect things like stress, but do they know where stress comes from? Is it that the person in front of you uh, is intimidated by you? Did they have a really bad announcement just before they started talking to you?
Hmm.
Are they stressed because they have to pick up their kids from school afterwards and they don't have the time for it? And I
And
think from a human perspective, if you can uh, see something is happening, if you can address it and if you can understand why it's happening and then do something good with it for the other person, I think AI won't be, I think, or I believe, and I hope, let's put it like that AI won't be able to do that in the near future. And I think those things are sort of a human IP, which you need to still be relevant next to what AI does.
yeah, well, yeah, talk about stress, and if you're talking about stress in the recruiting process, not everyone is a great interviewer. I've in almost every dimension of the recruiting process, I've observed some really bad interviewers.
Yeah.
And you can, tell me your strengths, tell me your weaknesses. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that can also create stress for people as well. It's and I think it takes and again, this goes back to this lazy love thing that if you're interviewing someone, if you're managing this process, I believe the outcome will be much better if you're vested into it. So you're aware, um, and like you said, that you
Yeah,
ask the unspoken question. Like,
yeah,
why are you distracted right now? Like
yeah,
what's happening within you that like I've had interviews with people, and one guy, I didn't see it. He had gray hair, but he just convinced us by the end that he was too old for the job. Like, and I asked him, like, why did you make such a point of your age? And it
yeah,
was really fascinating, to unpack that conversation and say, let's just put this interview on hold for a second. But what's going on within you that this is such a thing? And it was, and that was a rich conversation. And if I
yeah,
remember right, he was just going through the motions because he was getting his government thing and he just didn't want the job. But it was
yeah.
whatever. But it was really fascinating to see what was unspoken. So Werner, um, last question for me, unless you've got some more things to add, but we've just disappointed a lot of people because most CPO, CTO search processes will not happen like this.
No, no, yeah, yeah. True. Yeah, yeah,
So my question is and there's a lot of those in my network because this is the zone that I play. And I guess my question is, if someone is going through this process on either side of the table, but
yeah,
let's say as a candidate, and it's happening in a very traditional way, meaning checking hard skills and bum and seat instead of contributor on team. Um, how could they take inspiration from this to create a deeper, richer, more connected conversation, maybe without asking the CEO to take a big five personality test? That might be awkward to say, hey, I want to. Oh,
yeah,
maybe they could, but what do you think people could take from this to improve the connection and improve the selection and improve the chance of success if they don't have a guide like you managing the
yeah,
process?
yeah. Well, one of the things I always advise people is that the best interview is where the other one speaks more than you do. So that means that you have to ask the right questions and almost flip the vibe in the meeting or the way things flow. Because quite often people like to talk about themselves and like to talk about, and if you can ask the right questions and show that you understand what's happening, then it's probably way better than you're just telling on your what you've done. And because people have read that already on their resumes. And I know that, for example, a while ago there was this lady and she was being interviewed by a big, very well-known, well-reputed headhunter. And she was going into a third chat, I feel, with the headhunter before moving towards the company. And I asked her, can you ask them the question about what are the strengths and weaknesses about the team and what does that mean for me as a person? And then she asked the headhunter and he didn't know. Then
Mm.
she pulled back out of the procedure, which you can do at stage, or you can decide, well, I'm just going to ask the people at the company to do so. But I think with one or two proper and good questions, if you ask what is the team really good at, does the team needs to improve, and what is your own role in that? I think if you ask those three questions to a person that interviews you, you're flipping the talk completely, and you're getting a lot of input for yourself. For me, that would be always, or at least the interviews I've been doing for myself, I was asking more questions than any person on the other side of the table. Also because I like to get the information and then understand whether it's something for me as well, instead of only the other way around.
Well, I'm also thinking, like, I think also in a lot of this space where this is like tech startup scale up, the executives are usually on podcasts and stuff as well. I mean, you can also do some research and
Yeah.
get a flavor for these people. And maybe in that context, know what kind of questions to ask as well.
Yes.
And the best kind of interview conversations that I like to have is not what I did in the past, but how I did it and who I did it with.
Yeah.
And getting the same insight from the person, like the questions of when have you done something similar like this, and just tell me the story, and then it can become very rich. And one of the things that when I'm interviewing people I find very important is if they actually have questions, and particularly questions at the end, meaning if it's just like, oh nope, I'm fine, it's
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. I don't know.
Karen
And
goes
for
back.
me, and so one thing I would advise everyone is to make sure that you have your list of questions going in, and um, and knowing a bit of the personalities in the company, if they're public aware of that, then ask that. Because I think it's in your best interest as a candidate, just as much as their interest, to make sure there's a good fit here.
Yeah.
And like you said, let's have these harder questions more upfront, instead of like you said, the example you said, after 9 months they knew they had these niggling issues that was unspoken, and then at the end it collapsed the relationship. But I really like your point of ask the recruiter to have a perspective on this. So maybe even if they don't have Werner guiding the process, they can already push back into the system and say, hey, it's really important to me that the team dynamic that I'm joining, that I'm actually a net contributor, net addition to this team, and not a detractor for some unnecessary reason that we could have avoided if we just would have asked 2 questions.
Yeah.
Wow,
No.
cool. It's for me, I've come through suffering, and writing leading from love books, the importance of that team that you're on, and usually as an executive, the health of the dynamic of the leadership team is so paramount to me. And so this is why it was so important. Like when you were mentioning this, I was just instantly drawn to it, because you can enter an organization as a CTO or CPO and you can do your job super well, but if you're disconnected or distrustful or not communicating or not on board with the same strategy, it is just so devastating and frustrating and painful for people. So if you can, if you are a net benefit to that team, and if you're actively understanding yourself and engaging others and resolving these conflicts, it just makes everything work so much better. And love it.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, or at least what I find funny, if I were to ask people 2 or 3 years ago, what is important in search and executive search, they would never name this team thing. So from a proper product development or product building perspective, you always ask customers what they want. And no one ever told me this. Still, I believe it's the right way to move forward. So it was quite a stretch getting here, because I had to take a leap of faith. And nowadays it's still sometimes a stretch for people to explain this, because it's still not what they're used to, or what they're known to. But I think it's the only, for me, it's the only way forward. And hopefully I can make a plus service with this.
Well, putting it differently, I'm not saying it's about the team, but something that I'm reminded of is something that they say in the States. In the States is a unique place, but customer service is something they do pretty well. And one of the things I heard along the way was hire the smile and train the West. Meaning, if you hire for the personality of engagement and service, then all the hard skills you fill at it. Again, I'm not talking about an executive here,
Yeah.
But I think this the same thing kind of applies, but you're taking it to a completely different level. Is I want yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna say hire the click and do something, but that's just all silliness. I think just take it very seriously and
Yeah.
look at the team dynamic as much as the individual. So, Werner, anything to add, or we're wrapping up?
I think it's a wrapper. Absolutely. It was a really nice one
Yeah,
for me.
it's because I started to think and feel along the way like oh man, there's I wish this process for anyone who's going through this this thing, but not everyone has that. So I think this also this last piece of how can people apply this wisdom on their own
Yeah.
if they're not working with you on either side of the table. Actually, I think
Yeah.
there's wisdom here that they can pull on, but even better, they can call you and they can find you Werner Spronk on
Yeah.
LinkedIn
Yeah.
or techterrasearch.nl. And you're operating, I guess, mostly in the Netherlands. So this is our home camp, but you can find them on Tech Terra Search. The 3 different models are there. A little information about yourself, and of course, you're operating on LinkedIn. And I will have both of those links on the show notes. So Werner, thank you so much for joining. This is super cool.
Likewise, and I loved being here.
Thank you for listening to the Business Simplicity podcast. If this conversation resonated, please share it with a fellow leader navigating complexity. Visit ebullient.com to discover how we can partner to simplify your strategy, align your teams, and accelerate meaningful growth.